Hi guys, I hope that you are really well and having a great week. So as part of my new YouTube channel, I really wanted to give some tips and tricks and advice just to give inspiration for travel planning and organising your travel. So this is going to be my first video on my series in luxury travel tips. So basically I thought I'd start at the beginning. So I'm going to start with how to kind of organise your adventure, pretty much based on how I organise my adventure. I know we're all different. I'm quite a type A personality. It's something I've talked about on my blog before. I'm really super organised. I like to have everything in place and laid out. So obviously I'm not saying if that's not your personality, don't do exactly what I do, but maybe I can give you a few tips just to kind of structure how you plan a trip, just so you get the most out of it. Personally, I've got a massive fear of missing out, and I really hate going to a destination and, you know, I haven't booked something and it's closed or there's a massive queue. And so I just always make sure I have all my plans in place, just so I can get the best possible adventure and the best possible opportunities out of my trip, basically. So here we go. Let's get into it. I've got sort of some notes on my phone, so apologies if I keep checking my phone. So basically, where do you start? So the best place to start is, where do you want to go? So we've all got places that we've kind of always wanted to go to, you know, your dream places. For me, my dreams were Australia and South Africa. I'm currently really dreaming about South America. South America is a continent I've never been to, so it's massively on my list. So I've always become fixated on these places, and I've eventually ticked them off my list, and I'm sure you'll have those bucket list places too. And so you'll be working your way down the list, and maybe that's what's going to come up as where you want to go, obviously depending quite a lot on your budget and your time frame, but we'll get into that later. There's places he wants to go to, and we kind of talk it through and think about how we're going to kind of structure, especially like our summer or at Christmas when we've got more time off, and how we're going to arrange things and the best way of doing it. So yeah, we both have kind of our wanderlust lists. So that's one way we decide on where we're going. Another thing for myself, and probably for you too, is often we've got an event or a particular wedding or something abroad. So I always think it's really nice to structure another holiday around that wedding, whether it's staying at the destination or seeing more of the country. So when my best friend got married in Florence, we took the opportunity to have another longer extended trip there, visiting Chianti and some of the regions around, beautiful. Oh my god, it's amazing if you ever go to Florence, the beautiful regions around there. So that's another reason for why you might choose a particular destination. So for us, another one is a lot of our destination choices are based around air miles. So if you use air miles or avios like we do, you'll know that availability can be quite limited. So basically we have a look and see what's available in terms of air miles, because it's really cost cutting for us to use those. So that's a major thing for us, and I think generally availability is an important factor in deciding anything. You might have a hotel that you really want to stay in a particular place, and it's not available. Like some of the hotels we've stayed in, there's only 10 rooms. You need to book really far in advance. So that's also a very important factor in deciding where you want to go. So what do you do when you know when you want to go, and what do you want to see? So the next step is deciding on the duration of the trip. So if you're going like we are, if we're going with air miles, it might be set dates, or it depends on your working situation. So that's a factor too. But I think the best thing to do is kind of research the destination and think how much you want to see. Is it a long weekend, or is it a multi-destination trip, multi-center? Are you going to go to a couple of big cities and some outlying areas? How long are you really going to need in each place? So for me, once I've decided on where I want to go and I've kind of looked into So to look into the places, I start to build a spreadsheet. So I know it's really geeky, but I always use spreadsheets to plan my travel. It just makes it so much easier. Everything's really clearly laid out in front of you. So what I do is I start listing the dates, each sort of maybe city or beach destination of the country that I'm going to, and thinking how long am I going to plan on spending there. And so once I put all of that in, I can really look at how much time I'm going to have there, and is it enough, and do I want to change that around and maybe spend more time in another place and less time in another. So that's how I do it. I think about the major destinations. So for the sake of argument for this video, let's talk about a long haul destination, which is going to be a multi destination stopover. I'll use my South Africa trip as an example. So when we went to South Africa, I knew I wanted to go to Cape Town, I wanted to go on the garden route, and I wanted to go on safari. And I had a look at how much there was to do in each place and allocated the time on my spreadsheet. And that was how I worked out how long I wanted to stay there. And then comes budgeting. After I figured out where I want to go and the durations and where I'm going to stay, how much time I'm going to spend in each place, I sort of start to think about what hotels I want to stay in, because I mean, again, talking about from my perspective, hotels are really important to me because I'm very passionate about hotels, and often the hotel will provide the experience especially for luxury travel. So I start looking at what are the best hotels in each city or destination in the overall trip, and I sort of write down and work out how much each hotel is going to cost, and create another column on my spreadsheet so that I'm adding up how much each is going to cost, and eventually I'll come to my total. I also start to think, as well as the hotels, are there going to be any other major expenditures? Of course, flights is going to be a really big one. There might be some excursions which are going to cost a lot more. If you have sort of a favourite on your list, a bucket list restaurant that might be quite pricey, all of those are going to come and factor into it. So what I do then is, once I've got my spreadsheet together of my destination, my durations and my budget, I chat it over with Mr. S, or whoever might also be making the monetary decisions with you. We chat it over together and think, can we cut anything out, or are we happy to add anything on? Is this budget working out for us? So that's how we decide the budget. It's also really easy to do it with a spreadsheet, because obviously you have the formulas where you can just add it up, super easy, and also mess around with the durations and change it up however much you want to. So then after I've figured out the budget, then it comes to booking. So I make sure everything is available and all the flights are available before I get into booking anything. Quite often those smaller hotels that I told you about, 10 rooms, they're going to get booked up really quickly. So I get my booking in really quickly for those hotels. Often you do have to pay a deposit. Sometimes you have to pay the whole thing, but I think you've got to expect that as part of your planning and your overall idea. So how do I book? Sometimes I book straight through the hotel's website, just simply like that. Another thing I do is I often use Virtuoso Agents. This video isn't sponsored by anyone, it's just something I wanted to make myself totally. I've got no affiliation with Virtuoso, but I've often used their agents to help me book my hotels, and I can recommend a few agents. I'll put their links in the box down below. And yeah, basically I've always, nearly always got upgrades, but there are also perks through booking with Virtuoso Agents, so highly recommend doing that. Another thing I've done is book through travel agents. So I generally work out trips myself, and I can kind of work out how to get from A to B. But sometimes if the country is really, really new to me and I don't want to start slipping up and making mistakes, I talk to a travel agent so they can help plan a route. Maybe I need to hire a car, and all of that's gonna I'm gonna need advice on. So sometimes in that situation, I will go to a travel agent and speak to them and get a quote. But I do always work out if their quote's correct in comparison to what I've already worked out before, just in case. So then once I've got everything booked, it's all put into my spreadsheet, and I color code so I can see exactly what's booked and what isn't. Obviously, after the hotels, I do make sure the flights are available first, and then I get the flights all booked after the hotels if there are interlinking flights, or maybe there's a train journey that needs booking in advance. I do that too. So once I've got my everything in place on my spreadsheet in terms of accommodation and flights, and I know how much I'm spending on all those bigger things, I move on into the finer details. So like I said, I really don't like missing out on anything. For me, a really big key thing is going to restaurants that I've always wanted to go to. A lot of restaurants for me are on my bucket list. So for example, I really wanted to go to the French Laundry, which is a very well-known 3 Michelin star restaurant in California. So that was booked very far in advance. I'm going to be honest with you, I book basically all my restaurants in advance. I am not at all spontaneous. But I think the thing about booking restaurants in advance is they can be cancelled. So if you check the policy, the cancellation policy of the restaurant, you can make sure that you can cancel it if something changes in your trip, or suddenly you're ill, you don't fancy a night out or something. But basically, I generally make sure that I'm booking most of my restaurants in advance, especially if you're going somewhere like New York or LA or Paris or somewhere like that, where it's really hard to get a booking. Places like, if you're going to some remote island in Southeast Asia, you probably will find restaurant availability. It's not going to be quite the same, but I think it's good to know what there is there, so you'll make sure you get the best. I mean, I get it wrong, don't get me wrong, I get it wrong, and I've gone to restaurants which have just been awful, but 9 times out of 10, based on recommendations of friends, bloggers, TripAdvisor, I generally don't mess it up, and I generally end up with really great restaurants, which I then pass on to recommend to you on my blog. So that's one thing I do. I book restaurants in advance. Another thing that I book in advance often is tours and excursions. So especially when they're bigger tours or excursions, maybe a big boat trip or like a whole day tour of a place, I'll book that in advance. Sometimes I find the tour company myself online. Sometimes I've had recommendations. Quite often the hotel concierge will recommend them to me. So I'll make another video about kind of my favorite sources for research later, but that's what I do. I will then book all the finer details and get all my recommendations and make sure everything's in place. And then I put that in the spreadsheet too. So I've got all the timings of every restaurant and every booking that I have in my spreadsheet, so we don't end up missing anything or forgetting anything. So then once you have all your spreadsheet ready, that's it. And I do, I know what you're thinking. I do book in time for spontaneity, because Mr. S wants his relaxation time. So on my spreadsheet, I always have boxes for Mr. S to get his relaxation time. But yeah, so that's how I do it. And I would really love to know how you plan your travel. If you could maybe tell me in the comments, or send me a tweet, or right on my Instagram, and just tell me how you plan. Are you a type A, or do you go with the flow? Maybe I should start going with the flow a bit more, but I just really hate missing out. But I'd really love to know more about what you do, and also what you'd like to see in these kind of videos, and what kind of tips you'd like from me and to see on my channel. So if there's more you'd like to see, please write down below, give me a thumbs up, and please subscribe. Thank you so much for watching this. I'm sorry it's a little bit rambly, but I hope you've got something useful out of it. I wrote a blog post on this before and I will also link that down below. So thank you and have a lovely day.